This interview is intended to give the viewer a history of the American Board of Family Practice. The board's prime mover, executive director, and secretary, Dr. Nicholas Pisacano, is interviewed by Dr. Charles Ramsey, a diplomate of the American Board of Family Practice and a residency-trained family physician. Dr. Ramsey is presently professor and chairman of the Department of Family Medicine at the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. In the mid-60s, an AMA-appointed group, the Ad Hoc Committee on Education for Family Practice, issued a report that called for a new kind of specialist in family medicine, educated to provide comprehensive personal health care. The report defined the family physician and issued specific recommendations for that individual's education. It further stated that specialty board certification was essential for those properly prepared for family practice. Dr. Pisacano has been in full-time practice in Philadelphia. While in Philadelphia, he started the first clinical department of general practice at the Hahnemann Medical College. Dr. Pisacano went to the University of Kentucky in Lexington in 1962 with an appointment in their Department of Internal Medicine and as Assistant Dean of Arts and Sciences. It is significant to note that he was the first general practitioner to have a full-time appointment in an academic department of internal medicine. Dr. Pisacano was recruited to head the new American Board of Family Practice and became its secretary in 1969.
Family practice was the 20th medical specialty formed, and at the time that the board was created in 1969, I was a senior medical student just getting ready to graduate from medical school. I was aware at the time that the specialty was formed that there were a lot of things that led to the creation of a specialty, because when I started medical school there wasn't even family practice. And I wonder, Dr. Pisacano, if you could tell us to start with what some of the forces were in medicine that were going on at the time that led to the background for the board's creation. And then I've also heard there's a lot of history in the formation of the board, some controversy maybe, and that getting it started was a real struggle. Can you tell us a little bit about those forces and about how the board actually got started and what those struggles were?
Well, back in the, Chris, back in the early 50s, it was becoming evident that the generalist was rapidly disappearing from the medical scene. And some of us who were in general practice at the time realized that we needed to establish some kind of a beachhead to prevent this decline. There were several studies done. For instance, in 1959, there was a Bain report, Surgeon General report, from the Surgeon General's office, which declared there was a severe shortage of what they called the family physician potential. Now that included all internists, pediatricians, and general practitioners. But the report was rather an important report. It was entitled formally The Physicians for a Growing America, and it expressed some concern about this rapid decline. A little bit later, about 1962, the AAMC put out a report which showed that the general practice choice among medical graduates was also rapidly declining from about 35% in the 1950s down to about 18% in 1962, and further projections of those figures would show that perhaps in another 10 or 20 years it'll be less than 2% of the graduates choosing what we call general practice. And then thirdly, there was a very important report from the World Health Organization, their technical report number 157, that was about 1963, which showed that all across the nation and the rest of the world there was a decline in family physicians also, and that they expressed a real need for family physicians. So those of us who were in general practice and at the time were quite concerned. So we decided to do something about it, and we created this paper board, the American Board of Family Practice, which would meet that decline and also look into the reasons why the decline was occurring. So the first thing we did was look at why the decline was occurring, and actually there were several factors, and I can just name a few of them. One was that there was a lack of prestige growing for general practice. It was not a very prestigious thing in the 60s because of the rise of specialism and subspecialism. I attribute a lot of the specialism and subspecialism to World War II, when technology really boomed. And we didn't decry the rise of specialism. We thought that was important for the health of the American people. But we also were concerned about the loss of the generalist approach to the practice of medicine to individuals. And there was another factor, too. Hospital privileges were then being more and more granted to only those physicians who were board certified. And general practice had no board. And so what we planned to do was to establish a training program for physicians and declared a new specialty called family practice based on the heritage of general practice, but now with graduate training programs of 3 years at least, with a specialty board created to certify those specialists after they complete their training, and thirdly, to make sure that the specialty was a bona fide specialty, period. And so back in about 1963, we went to the liaison committee on specialty boards to ask them if we could have this specialty called the American Board of Family Practice. And they said, well, you need a sponsor of people who do this. So the next logical thing for us to do was to go to the American Academy of General Practice, of which we were all members, and they turned us down rather flatly. I think the
You mean they didn't want to have a specialty board then?
No. The interesting thing was that even though we were them and they were us, they felt no need for a specialty. They liked what the status quo was, apparently, at least their Congress of Delegates did, and they voted the idea out about 101 to 1 in 1963.
That's pretty deafening.
That's a pretty resounding defeat. Well, we were dismayed, and so back we gathered our forces together, and we studied the literature again, try to figure out ways we could develop a bona fide specialty with the approval of our own colleagues, the American Academy of General Practice. We went back to them in 1964, and this time they unanimously told us no. As a matter of fact, they told us don't come back with this idea.
You mean no?
And no, that was a big no. Well, then we really were dismayed, and we were a little bit concerned, so we again started working towards this thing, and eventually, though, we did prevail upon the Academy people, and they saw the wisdom of it in the next year. And in 1965, the best thing that ever happened to us was the American Academy of General Practice got behind the idea of sponsoring this new specialty called family practice. And once they got behind us, that was 1965, we knew then that probably nobody would stop us. It was a matter of time.
Sounds kind of like
that's the early part of the story. I would like to say, though, this time that there are many people who claim paternity for this specialty. Actually, it's not a specialty created by any one person, or the idea was not singular. It was in the minds of many of us, and all we did was just bring them together to start it. So.
Well, it sounds kind of like the early history of the American Revolution. You know, some of the colonists were not in favor of independence from England, and I'm sure it was not pleasant to be a soldier in George Washington's army starving out there at the winter of Valley Forge while the rest of the colonists were not in support of what you were doing.
That's an excellent parallel, because since I've reread American history, I really felt for those people back then, because nobody wanted them. Everybody wanted a king.
Well, now, there must have been some unsung heroes along the way that played a key role. I know I've heard the name of Tom Reardon.
Tom Reardon,
person that
was really important. If anybody could be called the father of family practice, no one person really should be, but if anybody could be, Tom Reardon. Thomas Reardon was the real prototype of the perfect family physician. He was a very knowledgeable physician. He had excellent record-keeping systems before formalized record-keeping systems were put into use. He knew all about his patients. He had profiles on every single patient. He was the most caring physician I've ever known, and he was the force behind this that encouraged me. I was the founding secretary of this board, and when things got a little bit rough and I get a little depressed, Tom was there to bolster me. He was so unselfish that when we did finally get our board created and the academy came on our side, he withdrew from the activities and let quote, the younger people take care of it. Very unselfish and very dedicated person.
That's amazing. So up into the late 60s, there was the question of how to form the board, I guess, to a certain extent, and who was in charge. Who were the players? The American Medical Association, our academy, the liaison committee. There were a lot of different groups that had something to do with this. Well,
actually, the sponsorship of the board to the liaison committee on specialty boards was the American Academy of General Practice in the section of General Practice, the AMA. At the time, I was secretary of the section of the General Practice, the AMA, and the Academy was a co-sponsor, and from then on it was go, all systems go, but a very tough go. Well, the road was not easy. Even with the Academy's support, our road was very tortuous and painful. They got behind us in 1965, and it wasn't until February 1969 we were officially recognized as the 20th primary specialty in America.
4 years.
4 hard years.
Process to go on. That's really amazing. There were a lot of issues that our board took brand new positions on, things like grandfathering and things like that. What was some of the background on those things?
The interesting thing is that when we created our board, on paper, we created right from the very outset there'd be no grandfathering. Nobody could become a diplomat of our board without taking the examination.
Now that's different than all the other boards.
The first specialty board ever created to do this. All the other boards began with, quote, grandfathers.
How did you get the members of the Academy and the GPs to agree that we wouldn't have grandfathers?
That was the tough part. That was one of the tough parts about this whole thing. We just stuck by our guns, and eventually, as I say, we prevailed. And I think the wisdom of the Academy prevailed, too. The other thing was that we did was innovative. You mentioned the word innovative. Was we created our board, the constituency of our board directors, was 10 family physicians and 5 specialists from the other major specialties, including internal medicine, pediatrics, psychiatry, surgery, and OB/GYN. So we had the first multidisciplinary board ever created also. And the third thing, which was really I think the real substance of the board, which as far as innovative things are concerned, is that we built into our bylaws right from the very outset that the diplomates who were certified by our board would be certified for no longer than 7 years, and so that there was mandatory recertification. Again, the first board, for a long while, even after we were recognized, to stay with this recertification. But that met with a lot of objections too in the beginning, but that we soon overcame those, and today nobody in our family, so to speak, objects to recertification.
So that we really led the way in recertification, in having an interdisciplinary membership on our board, and in not allowing people to simply become diplomates because they proclaim that they
were there in the beginning. Yes.
That's wonderful. That makes me very proud, you know, as a young member of our specialty, to have that kind of heritage handed all down.
And I've heard that from many other people who are resident trained as you are, that they're very pleased with that.
Absolutely. Well, when you formed the board, one of the first things that you had to do was to develop a way to visually impress people with the fact that there was an American Board of Family Practice. And I know the very first time that I ever saw the seal of the American Board was when I got my ticket to come and take my exam. Tell me about the seal and how it was formed.
Well, I have here a seal that I am very proud of, obviously. It's a seal which the upper half of the seal shows the palm tree. It's a palm tree which botanically is known as the Phoenix stactylifera. And the legend is that when this tree burns down, or if it dies, another tree will grow in its place. This symbolizes the heritage of general practice from which we came. Family practice being the
regrown
palm tree. And on the bottom left half of the shield, there's the phoenix, the famous legendary Arabian mythological bird, which has been reputed to restore itself periodically. When the bird is dying, it builds its own funeral pyre and consumes itself in its own ashes, but from that arises a new phoenix. That represents to us the periodic recertification. And of course, the other part of the shield shows in the lower right-hand corner the staff of Aesculapius, which every physician is familiar with. And then, of course, there's a Latin inscription, Palmum qui meruit ferat, which goes back to the ancient Roman tradition of let him bear the palm who earns it, and that is the original certification. In other words, the Roman gladiators received a palm branch when they were victorious, and we consider that as the same thing as getting certified.
Sure.
So all this has some symbolism, and there's that constant symbolism of continually rebirth,
wonderful.
Periodically.
Well, I think the seal and its history is just absolutely fascinating. Now, I want to get on to some real brass tacks and talk for a few minutes about the examination process, because that's something that's of interest to everybody. Tell me a little bit about how our examination is put together and what we do to make sure that we are really asking the right questions on that examination.
Right. Well, the examination, as you allude to, is central to the whole board certification process. Without a good examination, there's not a good board. In the beginning, we followed the usual routines the other boards do. We learned a lot from them. But then we decided to do things a little differently. One of the things we have done that's different, we've done a very scientific content validity study of what is being practiced out in family practice. Not what I think, not what you think, not what our board of directors thinks, but what is actually being practiced. We did a very, very legitimate study. We randomized 600 diplomates, and we sent them some concepts, and they really worked on it for a while. They did a lot of editing, and then we polished that up, redrafted the content, and sent it to another 600 randomly selected group of diplomates. And by then we had a good idea of what we thought was the content validity. There were no surprises in it for us, but at the same time made it a valid study. It was not just what we said it was. And then we draw a lot of our examination material from the content of family practice. We do draw on some other things on the cutting edge, which maybe might not have reached the practice world yet, but not too much of that. All of our exams are validated and considered to be reliably, statistically speaking. And then we have, it goes through several committees. The process is a winnowing process through many, many committees. The committees, the early committees that look at it are multidisciplinary in nature too. We have nationally famous psychiatrists, internists, pediatricians, surgeons, and so forth, all on this examination committee, plus many family physicians representing the academic as well as the practice world. And then after they're edited and looked at for accuracy and timeliness, then there's another committee that we have look at it we call a relevancy committee. This is primarily practicing family physicians. It goes back to that content validity again. And these people we select are very bright, practicing family physicians. They're full-time practitioners. And there may be one or two academic people we throw in there too. And they tell us whether this thing is relevant to the practice or not. Then there's a third committee that looks at it, sort of puts the blessing on it to make sure as a final look at it. So our exams are pretty carefully edited and developed.
But the questions themselves are really written by members of the board, aren't they? Don't you have people who are, well, I mean, diplomates of the board?
Yes. Diplomates of our board and some other specialists.
Test item writers. You have a big group of people that spend a lot of time and effort developing questions for
One of the things we did, again, that no other board has done as of yet, we developed a test item writers symposium every year where we train diplomates of the American Board of Family Practice how to write questions. Everybody thinks they can write a question until they write it.
It's not easy. I've
not easy. It's a lot of hard work.
That's right.
And it takes about a year and a half to get to be a good item writer. And we've developed now a cadre of about 100 good, promising young family physicians who are writing our questions, who are deeply involved. And we've got a camaraderie, too, with those people, which is really special.
Yeah, that's really just great. Well, now, is the cognitive knowledge the main thing? I mean, what happened to the art of medicine in the certification process?
Well, we get that question all the time. You know, medicine is not what you know, but is how you treat people. Well, that's so much hogwash. First place, we contend that the most important thing of all is knowledge. If your physician doesn't know, no matter how kind he is and how nice a guy he is, if he doesn't know, you don't want him for your physician.
That's right.
So we put a big stress on cognitive knowledge. That we can test validly, too. But we do look at our residents training for the other factors which we can't test on paper and pencil. For instance, how he uses his hands, how the resident uses his hands, procedural skills. We're developing a mechanism for monitoring that very carefully throughout the residency. And the third thing, of course, is the person's interpersonal skills, his characteristics and qualifications that are purely of his own nature. And we look at those through the residency training program. And even though, again, a person may be very bright and may be very skillful with his hands, if he doesn't have it in his heart, we don't want him in family practice either, and he should be weeded out early in the program. So I use the euphemism very often that our young people trained in family practice, by the time they reach the end of the third year, they have it in their head, in their heart, and in their hands. Now, getting back to the head part, we've done another innovative thing with in-training examinations. We're not the first board to use in-training examinations. Many of them have been doing it for years. But our in-training examination is unique in that it's, again, highly developed by academic and practitioners. But the resident takes the examination, and when he walks out of the room, he's handed a booklet with every single option on every question answered and reference to the current literature, so that's an immediate fortification of his knowledge. The residents take the in-training examination totally anonymous to the board. We don't know who they are. As you know, as a program chairman of the department, you know, and you assign code numbers to those residents.
That's right.
But we don't know who they are. But with the program directors, I think this message is very important for the residents to know, that if the program director and the individual resident and they're the only two who know what their scores are. We don't know who they are. We grade them and score them, but we don't know they're coded. If they would take this in the proper light, at which 98% of them are doing, then the residents would learn so much. If it's sort of a self-assessment thing, there's no punitive action taken. But if the remedial action is taken at the program level with the resident and the program director, we should really almost approach a zero flunk rate exactly at the end of the third year. And so we're not ashamed of the fact that our flunk rate is about 5% now. It really should approach even less than that.
Well, Nick, really, residents register with the board way before the time comes for the exam. Is that right?
That's correct. We just were recently putting in a registration system for all residents, so by the time they finish their residency, we'll have a pretty good idea of who's in every specialty. It is important that the residents do cooperate in this because it makes the registration for the certification exam much easier. And we ask them to change, when they change address, to let us know. We have, as every board that I've talked to, all the specialty boards have the same problem, that when physicians move, they don't let anybody know where they are. And with recertification, since we have mandatory recertification, if they don't let us know where they are, we send them the last address, and they may lose their certification if they're not careful. So we're asking them to continue to be in touch with us.
Now, residents need to let you know not only when they change address, but also there are certain times when a resident changes programs, and they have to be in touch with the board about that. And a lot of residents, in my experience, don't know that it's their responsibility to stay in touch with the board.
Well, we've sent the word around several times to every program in the country that when a resident transfers, it must meet the board's approval first before they transfer, because we don't particularly cotton to them transferring just capriciously. If there are some strong personal reasons, like a husband is being transferred to another city and the wife is a resident and vice versa, those things are understandable. But all transfers must have prior approval of the board.
And it could be that the board could say to a resident, well, we didn't know that you were changing programs, and so we're not going to give you credit for this if the resident doesn't exercise the responsibility to keep the board informed. And
what we're going to do starting next July, we're going to send out to every entering resident in the programs a list of the general essentials, that is the essentials put out by the ACGME, then the special essentials for family practice put out by the RRC, the board requirements, and then have each program put any particular program requirements and have the residents sign that they're aware of that. They do that from the very beginning. They'll realize that these things will
happen. Well, you mentioned keeping the board apprised for address purposes on recertification. Tell a little bit about the recertification process, because I've been recertified, and I thought that was a lot of fun, and it was an interesting process.
Well, I appreciate that. We, again, recertification is unique still to family practice, although other boards now are coming in with it. There are several major boards now are coming with what they call a dated certificate. They don't like the word recertification. I don't know what's in the name. But our recertification process consists of 4 major elements. 1, the physician must maintain a valid and unrestricted license to practice in the United States or Canada. Number 2, that physician must have a minimum of 300 hours of continuing education in a 6-year period. If that person is a member of the Academy of Family Physicians in good standing in the past 6 years, that's automatic CME credits. If not, they can submit their credits on a unit-by-unit basis. And the third thing is the office record review. That is very unique.
Now that's the part I thought was the most fun. Well, very interesting and instructive to me.
What we do in that, Chris, as you know, you've been through it, is that we actually review records, and I won't go into details, it would take too long, but they're given complete instructions of their practice records, which we do a review through a computer analysis of this, and it tells them where certain deficiencies may or may not be. And if that record review is satisfactory, then they are allowed to sit for the cognitive examination.
So getting recertified really is a lot more than just taking an examination.
Oh, yes.
In other words, whether you're licensed, whether you've kept up your commitment to continuing education, and the kind of care that you give to patients all count in addition to your score on the exam.
We feel the record in some way indirectly reflects your knowledge.
Sure.
But the real cognitive exam, really tells you what the cognitive knowledge is. And that it's interesting way we do this. On the recertification examination, it's given the same time and the same places as the certification examination. So in the morning part of that July day when certification is given. The residents who just completed their program, going for the certification exam, take the same identical examination as the oldsters, my age, are taking in the morning. Exact same exam. But in the afternoon, the recertification candidate has the option of selecting 3 out of 8 modules. And that's the way he can profile the practice. And he gives that option, provided he's been satisfactorily through the office record review. Sure. So it gives a credibility to each group. For the youngster to sit next to the oldster, and for the oldster to sit next to the youngster is a nice reciprocal relationship. It really is.
Well, we're now coming up on a time when the board has been formed for nearly 15 years.
Right.
What has been accomplished during this period of time? What is the record of production, and
well,
if you will?
That's interesting also. In 15 years, we went from ground zero to where we now have certified 33,000 physicians.
Wow.
And over half of those have been residency trained. These are not all the oldsters who took the examination. Up until 1978, a practitioner who met certain criteria, strict criteria, could take the examination instead of the grandfathering clause. But since 1978, only residency candidates, and we've certified close to 17,000 people through the residency route. In addition to that, we sprung from 0 programs, training programs, to now today we have a little over 380 accredited training programs in the United States with over 7,400 resident training. The interesting thing is that we are the second most productive specialty in the United States, second only internal medicine. We produce, for the last 10 years, in consecutive 10 years, we produced the second largest number of certified, board-certified physicians in the United States. And I think that's a record we're proud of in a very short 15 years.
Well, that shows that a lot of the original thoughts about the need for this specialty were absolutely right at the time that they were developed.
And as you know, for some of the work you're doing, the need is even greater now. And so even though we've plateaued for a short while, I think we're going to have a secondary rise in the family practice training programs and residents, because we need them. And I think the public, this specialty was created out of social need. Organized medicine didn't see that need, but we did, but the people did. Without the public's backing this, they even went so far as to mandate it in certain state schools because of the need. And we think that's a real trust they put in us, and we still owe them more. We owe them a lot more. We got to put up more family physicians. And I might say this, that when we established this specialty, we established a covenant for the youngsters who were still like you in medical school at the time. But I think now the covenant is now transferred to you people to establish a trust with the youngsters who are still in high school or medical school today, because it's got to continue. And I think that was a very sacred trust we put in. This is not any schmaltz or anything like that.
Oh, I know.
It's the honest to goodness truth that if we live up to that trust, which our people have, my generation has, and the youngsters can come on and continue that trust and continue to reproduce themselves by being, number one, good physicians. Number one, good physicians. What's a good physician? He's competent. And we're going to see these days competent because we're going to test him every 6 years. And at the same time, he's got to render the comprehensive care and not gouge the patients, and be very, very fair with the patients and make sure they can take care of their needy as well as those who can afford it. And the important thing is they got to be available. A real good physician who's not available is not a good physician. It's like having a library full of books that nobody ever opens. They're useless. So that's been one of our problems in the United States in all specialties, availability. But now we're starting to make ourselves available after 5, on Saturdays and on Sundays, and that's going to have to come. But the young people must realize that's part of the future, that they have to work. And they got to provide that real continuity of care and good care.
Well, it's an exciting time to be involved in family practice. I feel like the oldest child in the family, and I guess I was just about in that first group that came along, and I hope that all of us in my generation are going to be able to do the kind of job that you guys did in founding the specialty, particularly you and your contributions as the founder of the American Board of Family Practice. This has been a lot of fun. We'll have to get together in another 10 years and have the 25-year conversation.
I hope so. I hope I'm around anyway.
We will.
I know
we will.
Thank you.
Okay.
The preceding interview and overview of the history of the American Board of Family Practice was funded jointly by the Family Health Foundation of America and the American Board of Family Practice.